Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I have a return guest this week. I'm super excited about this, not just because I love having conversations with Becky. You've heard Becky before, Becky Mollenkamp. She's been on several Big Brave Business conversations, solo and group conversations. And we always have like really interesting, deep combos. And in the spirit of that, Becky, first of all, welcome back to the podcast. But second of all, congratulations on your book.
Hello, and thank you very much. I'm very excited about the book, and I keep coming back because we have great conversations. And I was saying beforehand, I don't know what we're going to talk about. And I love that because I have full faith that whatever we talk about is going to be great. And that's amazing.
I love that. Also, just for the record, for the person listening, we had a whole Google Doc, and we actually, Becky's seen it. We commented back and forth on it. It's just been a few weeks. So just for the record, I did not ask you to come in cold.
And I have the memory of a goldfish thanks to perimenopause. So
also, You're trying to do a bunch of these because, hello, new author. So, okay, let's just start there. Like, give me a rundown about the book.
Yes, the book is Liberate Your Business.
That's why you're here.
Yes, and the subtitle is A Radical Guide for Entrepreneurs Building Inside a Broken System. If you're watching, there's the cover. Yeah, I have wanted to write a book for like everyone, right? First of all, I want to write the next great American novel. That will probably never happen. But just like every frustrated writer, I'm a journalist by trade. I have 2 journalism degrees. I've worked in journalism. Writing has always been second nature. I've always wanted to be a published author, but I've never really been sure what I wanted to write. And like so many people, I kept waiting for perfection to show up at my door and just be like, poof, now you've written you have the perfect topic and the perfect approach and everything will be great. That didn't happen, but I did turn 50. And I started to realize life is getting shorter by the day, as it does for all of us. And I was like, I really want to accomplish this goal this year. And so I set about finally doing that and realizing I did have something to say, that I think it is something of value that I think will be helpful for people. And I have to just get over the fears and start doing it. And some of those fears are, why would anyone care what I have to say? Haven't other people said it better? All of the things that I think hold so many of us back. And yet those were the very things I wanted to help people with and write about. And so I finally was like, okay, it's time to just, I guess, walk my talk more and do the thing and not be so afraid.
First of all, let me just say I see you, because also been writing since I was a tiny child. Huge dreams from the time everything I wanted to be when I grew up was this and an author. Like I always wanted to write. I did write. I've been writing my whole life. And I also have had this paralyzing sense of, if I'm going to publish a novel, it has to be like my magnum opus. Like it, and the pressure of that is insane. Also, why do we do this to ourselves? But I just want to say this because I heard you say similar things there and I feel it. And so I know that chances are good the person listening has also felt this. And yeah, not only am I working on various novels, but I also have a business book I've been working on and workshopping, and it's been in the works for a couple of years now and just sort of dragging. So let's like kind of start there. There's a lot of things you could have written, especially journalists by trade. I just learned that about you recently. And I was like, we're not journalists here. And you're like, actually I am. I was like, oh, just kidding. I didn't know that. That's really cool. But you could have written any number of things. And so like, why this? Why did this need to be a book? Not just like content and conversations, because you host multiple podcasts, you go on podcasts, right? You do this in your work in the way that you're a business coach, right? And so why did it need to be a book? And why'd you start here?
Did it need to be? Maybe not, right? I don't know. But I do know that not everyone listens to podcasts. Not everyone listens to all of my podcasts. Not everyone's going to read all of my blogs or read my Substacks or the million other places I put content, right? Certainly no one's going to probably sift through my 6 million threads and read them all. So there's a lot of this existed, but there wasn't like a place to be able to point people to say, this is my philosophy. This is when we talk about the vision that I want to cast for business, when I'm working with clients to say, let's change the way we look at business. What does that mean? And I want to have a place to point people to say, this is it. This is the work. This is the work I do that I want others to do, that I think we all can be doing to create this better world. And here is one place to go, and it's all there. You can't afford to work with me? Cool. Here's a place to start, right? Or you aren't sure if you want to work with me, if I'm the right kind of business coach for you, here's a place to see. This is everything I mean and represent and care about. Like, this is kind of my heart on a platter for you to look at and decide, do you share that same philosophy? You could do bits and pieces of that in other ways that you could have interacted with me, but there wasn't really this sort of one unified source for everything. And I just felt I've been more and more writing out policies and mission statements and values, and I have all of those things, but I didn't have a place to coherently, completely express this philosophy in all the ways it shows up in business. And I guess I just felt ready to do that. And a big part of it was giving myself that permission, because as I've been doing all of this, my own work around unlearning, racism and all of the oppressive systems that we all have inside of us, as I've been doing that unlearning work, one thing that comes up, and I think people will relate to this too, especially those who have more privilege, is, am I the person, as a privileged person, to be sharing this message? So much of what is in this book, I learned from folks with far less privilege, from folks with marginalized identities. And there is that part of me to say, why should I write the book as a white woman and profit off of it when there are these other amazing people who I've learned from? And where I ended up with that is, part of my privilege is to amplify those voices. And those voices shine and sing throughout this book. They are highlighted. There are photos of many of them. There are Q&As with them. I got all of the permission of all these women who I've featured in Q&As. They are cited in the acknowledgments. They are cited in the opening introduction. They are throughout. And it felt like my way to be able to use what small platform I have to finally do that, to really say, I'm going to, when I talk about amplifying those voices, here I am doing it. So those were all kind of the things that came together, along with just timing and my age and wanting to leave a legacy and everything. That was like, the book needs to happen now. And I want it to be a book, not just another podcast. Although I love podcasting.
Yeah, I know you do. It's so interesting and exciting and also hard. Yeah. I just want to say, I see and acknowledge, like, it is one of the things that's so interesting in the unlearning and relearning exploration of being a white woman who wants to be a good ally and who wants to care and like make the world a better place, which I think the people listening to this podcast, that's a lot of us, right? And I do think it's a balance of knowing when to shut the fuck up. And also, yeah, it's like, it's a responsibility. If you have privilege, if you have a platform, then it's like a responsibility to amplify other voices. It's a weird balance, and it takes both, and it's not going to be perfect. And we do the best we can, and we're open to learning how to do it better. And then we put that into practice, and that's the best that we can.
Yeah. And honestly, Sarah, that's one of the hardest parts about writing a book, I discovered. And I've talked to other people now that I'm an author, which is very exciting to say.
You are.
I mean, I've been an author of articles and things, and I even have submitted to, I've been a part of a compilation book. This is my first, I feel like I can finally say I'm a published author and even a professional author, because I have sold a couple of books. So I am now a paid author. But I was talking to more my peers in the author world. One thing that I have heard and that I experience is the hardest part is being okay to publish the book, to say it's good enough. And I think so many of us can relate to that in so many parts of our business because of that perfectionism stuff, where I could have sat with this book completed, but continued to massage it for the next 2 decades of my life easily. Because constantly I'm learning new things. Constantly my own thinking is evolving and changing. And it's really scary to capture this snapshot and put it out with my name on it to say, this is what I believe, knowing full well that in a year or 2 years, there's going to be parts of this book that probably embarrass me, or that I'm like, ooh, that's not quite how
Put
I
it
see
in the next one.
Well, we'll see. You're speaking way too far ahead. But yeah, like just being able to say, it's good enough. And good enough is really, really hard for us to do.
Yeah.
And also, there's a whole chapter in the book about perfectionism.
Yeah.
And I even acknowledge, I'm like, I see the irony of the fact that this book almost didn't come out because of my perfectionism. And here I am talking about perfectionism, because that is the system trying to keep us from doing things like this. And it was really hard where I finally had to say, okay, this is my last pass. Last time I read this book and it's finished, whether I like that or not, whether in 6 months I look at it and say, oh my God, Becky, why'd you leave that in? Or even if in 3 months after it's printed, I see a typo. That's it. It's done. It is what it is now. And that's really,
Yeah.
really, really, really scary.
Yeah. But exciting and just really a big accomplishment. So own the title. I'm excited for you. I'm proud of you. And I definitely have like a lot of other questions about the book writing process and how it's been since. But before we get into that, let's get into some conversation about what liberating business really entails and looks like. Like let's talk about some of the things. I don't want to get too far into, of course, please reference whatever you want to, what's in the book, because I want the person listening to buy it and to read it. And also, if this conversation is interesting, help us. There's so many ways you can help with getting this book into libraries and getting this book into local bookstores and all kinds of things like that to make this even more accessible of a conversation to more people. That said, one of the things that comes up for me in this kind of idea of liberating a business is talking about capitalism being extractive. And I know that this is obviously a huge theme of what you talk about, what you write about, what your whole platform has been even before the book. So I know the book addresses this concept of like hustle versus rest, which is not crazy. If you've been engaging in any of this kind of discussion up to this point, you've definitely heard getting away from hustle culture and things like that. That's like kind of the baby steps into talking about this. And if you're new to this conversation, also so welcome here. But this idea of like hustling versus rest and going beyond that and expanding to power versus harm. That's like a big theme that I see as being relevant to what you have in this book. And so here's my question. What does it actually look like? If you're building a business, which we are, we run businesses, we're leading businesses, we're growing businesses, we're looking at some version of scaling, right? What does it look like to scale without extraction? How can you do that? And how can you do that?
You absolutely can do that. I have a client that comes to mind immediately who's operating a, what would that be? 8 or 9 figures, multi-million dollar,
Sure. Yeah.
right? 20 plus, 30 plus $1 million a year business that is as non-extractive as a business existing inside of capitalism really can be, right? And it is possible. And what looks different at every turn, her question is, how do I do this in a way that honors the people first, right? Not the profits first, not the corporations first, but the people first. Those people include her, because she has to be able to stay in it and to sustain the business. Her consultants and employees, her clients, and the community, the greater community she serves, because she's also somebody who gives back a lot inside of her community. But at every turn, with every decision, and I meet with her every month, we focus on, what does it look like to prioritize the people here? And then how do we make business decisions that support that? What needs to shift to do that? Right now, it's looking at, how do I offer health insurance to people who are on a 1099? What would that look like? Is that possible? Can I do that? Corporations would want you to believe it's not possible, but there are ways to do that. It may not look the same as what she can give to her employees or what a giant corporation is doing for their employees, but she can say, is this possible? Now, what might that mean? It might mean her profits are going to be less this year. It might mean she doesn't bring home as much money or put as much into her retirement plan. So some of it then is talking about what's enough, right? And this is like a thing that we don't talk about. Capitalism does not want us to think about. We are only ever conditioned to think about more, right? So sometimes it does mean we have to think about enough. So she's had to sit down and really think about, what is enough for her? What is enough for her family? What is enough for her life? So that she can maybe sometimes make those harder choices, where the choice might can I offer this health insurance plan that would enhance the lives of the people inside this company, right? Would be aligned with the value set I have, or do I give myself a little more money this year? Some people may not be able to do that. that decision may look like I can't, because then it becomes extractive of me, because it becomes a choice of I can't feed my family. I won't be able to retire ever, right? So we have to think of all of the humans inside of the equation and decide where's the extraction happening. But in her case, doing that, she has enough. She can still have enough and do that. So then her pocketing the extra versus doing this begins to be extractive of the people that she's asking to operate inside of her company, right? So it's looking at where is the harm, who's bearing the brunt of that harm, how much is enough for everyone, what does it look like for all of us to be whole inside of this equation, where can I do that, what sacrifices might have to be made, what is the cost of those. There's this sort of constant play with that cost benefit analysis, but in a way that is not just about looking at every part of that equation as dollars or numbers, but looking at the pieces of the equation that are human and what are the needs inside of that.
I love so much of what you said there, because yes, an enough number is more and more becoming, in at least like the ethical side of like those of us who are like trying so hard to do business ethically, it is something that I'm seeing more and more conversation about on social media and in podcasts and things like that. Now, of course, there are business communities that are not having this conversation, but those of us who are hanging out over here on this corner of the internet, you're hearing more and more of this stuff about like cozy businesses and staying solo on purpose and like things that really are coming from people who, I think, in an effort to move away from hustle, they are, and this word cozy really evokes that, right? Like what's the opposite of hustling? Cozy and hustle just don't go together, right? And so
yeah, like, I call it in my book slow revolution. It's like a slow business, but cozy is a similar thing. It's like,
and what I love about what you said the most about this is that I've been a little bit resistant to this. I think this is a little bit, I've talked about this on the podcast a lot over the last few weeks, because this is what is going into my book, right? Is I kind of reject some of the cozy business things because I think it's a little bit of an overcorrection. What I love about you and what you said there is that we're going beyond, it's not hustle versus rest or hustle versus cozy or fast versus slow. It's power versus harm. And I think that what I heard you say is we're putting people over profit, or we're putting people before profits, right? But it's all the people, and that includes you. And so when we think about who's being harmed by this, you get to be one of the people who gets to be considered.
You have to be.
I love that. And I think that in some ways, that includes getting paid for your work, your effort, your expertise, your time,
Absolutely.
Your experience, your contribution, and not just paid, but recognized and all of those things, right? And so it's all of the above. It's clients, it's prospects, it's collaborators, it's your team if you have one, and it's you and your family. And so I think really being able to dig into when you're thinking about what your enough number is, and I'm sorry to say it like that, I feel like it is a little bit, if you hang out in these spaces, it's a little bit played out of a topic. If you don't hang out in these spaces, it might be new, in which case I'm not poo-pooing it. It is something to explore. But and I've said this on the podcast before, but one of the things is I looked at like truly what is my enough number in the grand scheme of, not in a year, not in a month, nothing like that, but the grand scheme of what is that enough number that I truly feel would give me and my family and my goals, my team, etc., what would meet the criteria of what it is that I'm trying to accomplish truly? $5 million. That's my enough number. So your enough number doesn't have to be $3,000 a month. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. I think so often these like slow, small, tiny, cozy businesses are like I make my car payment and that's enough. And if that truly is enough for you, that's fine. But for me, I'm looking at want financial stability for me and my kids where we're not a car accident away from financial ruin. That's what I want. I want access to healthcare decisions as my husband and I get older and our health gets more complicated. I want to have access to making decisions, right? And that shouldn't be a tall order, but it does require money. I want to be able to pay off student loan debt and not have to carry that debt with me. I want to have options. And in a capitalist society, having options requires having resources, right? And so I think there's like a lot of things and now that $5 million is not for me to go in my pocket. I'm not saying I need 5 million in cash in my bank account. It's 5 million to accomplish XYZ for these people who are my like stakeholders, right? Which is what you were talking about of these different layers. Anyways, I love that.
And I think I just want to quickly say,
yeah, please do.
and part of what the book acknowledges as well is there are two sides to all of these components. There is the side of this for those who hold more privilege, and the side of this for those who hold far less privilege and maybe far more marginalized identities. Because when we talk about enough in circles of folks who have a lot of privilege, who look more like you and I, what that often looks like is maybe I don't need as much as I thought I did. We have to acknowledge the other side of that for people who have different identities where there's more marginalization. That enough is challenging them, like you were saying, to charge more, to dream bigger, to allow for more, to not accept less than, right?
Enough.
Right?
That gave me chills, Becky. I love that.
Well, because I think that's also part of the problem when we're in too many spaces. And I've been called in on this. And so that's one of the reasons I want to share it, because I think it's really easy when we're two white women talking about this and we talk about enough and like kind of roll our eyes at it. And I totally get where you're coming from, because yes, I'm in a lot of those spaces too. And it's like, okay, but for us, it usually looks very different than for a different group of people for whom talking about enough is, can I believe that I'm worthy of enough? Can I believe that I'm allowed to have enough? Can I advocate for my enough?
Yes. And Becky, this is why the book is so important, and your podcasts too, because this is exactly why I roll my eyes. It's what is missing from the conversation. And I think so often the people who are posting about these kinds of topics in a way that makes me reject it or scroll by or whatever, I don't engage. There's no point, because if it's right for them, it's right for them. But like, just scroll by it is because I do feel like that's what's missing. And that permission for people who are already struggling with asking for what they deserve or even what they need, not even just what they deserve, what they need. There are a lot of people who are turning to entrepreneurship, or who entrepreneurship is an opportunity to be able to ask for what you need, to be able to work toward that. And I think that's missing from a lot of those conversations. Now, of course, granted, a lot of this conversation that I'm seeing is on Threads. And so there's a character count and there's a lot of layers to that. But
well, and also just that piece too of those who have more privilege to recognize the responsibility component of that. And how are we going to be stewards of this privilege and stewards of the financial component of that privilege? So when we're thinking about our enough, it becomes very like, well, what's enough for me and mine? And what I really want to challenge people on is, and I'm not just talking money, because I'm also talking about visibility, access, time, joy, all of these things. And when you have more privilege and more responsibility because of that privilege, part of that has to be then I want my worldview to be beyond just what's good for me and mine, but also for that broader community. So when I talk about the stakeholders, it also includes the broader community, which does include people who have more marginalized identities. Because part of that, let's skip money, because I think that can be where people get a little like sensitive. But let's move to something that's a little easier, like visibility. If I've been invited on 10 podcasts in the last month, and I don't really have that much time, I'm not really promoting anything. Even if I were, by the way, this still applies, but I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for people to see what I'm saying. What does it look like for me to say, you know what? Here are 10 amazing Black women who do the same kind of work I do, and they don't get the attention I get. I would love for you to invite them instead of me. What does it look like for us to say, when I have enough, how do I make sure that excess I'm using that, I'm being a steward of the excess in a way that's responsible and aligned with my values, right? So it goes beyond, like, so if your number's at 5 million and you get to it, what capitalism is going to try to make you do is start hoarding on beyond that 5 million, right? It's going to really make it tempting. And it's going to make it so you feel like you can justify it. Right. And so the challenge becomes, can I stay with my values and say, I now am in a place of having more than my enough. Enough is enough. I have more now. And again, money or all these other things. How do I begin to give some of that? And so like with my person I'm talking about, who's got a $20 million company, when there is what's enough of the hours she needs to demand from her consultants? Does 30 hours get it done? And she's only taking 40 because that's what society has told her she's supposed to do. Could she just do the 30 and give those people that 10 hours back to rest or to have joy, right? That's part of what being that responsible steward looks like. So it goes beyond just money. And I think it's really important for us to think about that too in these conversations. We get fixated on money for good reason, but enoughness goes beyond just the dollars in our lives.
It does. And I love that you said that, especially joy. And I'm thinking about, your book also talks about boundaries, pleasure, and like you said, slower pace. But all of these things also do have a cost associated. And I think that's where money continues to come up, is that different people, as you said, have more access to some of those things than others. And this is like, again, if you're kind of newer to some of these conversations, this can feel a little bit overwhelming, but can we talk a little bit about that? About cost and accessibility of things like joy, pleasure, boundaries. Who has more access to pleasure? Who has more access to boundaries? What does that look like? And what is the cost associated with having access to that?
There's financial cost. There's also social cost, right? So that's an important piece of this, because when women assert boundaries, and most especially when Black and brown women assert boundaries, even if that doesn't have a financial cost, there can be a very strong social cost, a cost to career, a cost to choice, a cost to access to love and care. So that is something that's very real. And the more marginalized identities you hold, the more the cost goes up, which is again why those of us with more privilege have to do the work to be the ones at the forefront of asserting these things, so that it becomes more habitualized and expected, so that when those other women who have less privilege than we do, and not just women, non-binary folks, our trans siblings, all these folks, when they are also then trying to, it becomes more of an expectation and not something that has such a great cost to it. But there is definitely a cost. Now, I mean, I would push back a little on that. Joy doesn't have to cost money. We've been trained by capitalism that it does, right? There are plenty of ways to experience joy without it costing you $1, or pleasure without it costing $1. That said, there are many things that bring people joy and pleasure that do cost money. I was just having a conversation with my co-host on on one of my podcasts, Messy Liberation. Tyann and I were talking about travel, and how travel has a great deal of cost, both in financial cost, but also she's a queer woman of color. There are places she can't travel. There are real barriers to her safety to be able to go there. That's a cost. That's a cost. She's in a larger body, as am I. That is a cost, because there's comfort that becomes at a cost to travel, right? So there are all sorts of costs that people don't think about that are not just money, but money is certainly one of those. And obviously, we live in a world that's designed for white, cishet, able-bodied, educated, wealthy, and in this country, Christian men. Like, that's who the world is designed for. The less you fit into each of those, tick off of those boxes, the greater the cost becomes for everything, literally everything, both financially and socially.
Yeah, yeah. And I like that you said social cost too, because I think there's so much of this that I feel like we could just keep digging into. But
I'm here, Sarah. Let's do it.
Echoing all the things that you said, and my brain is like freak training right now of like, yeah, and this and this and this. I think at the end of the day, what my perspective on this is in this moment is that if you have more resources, you have more freedom to use those resources in any way that brings joy or pleasure or boundaries. It's a lot harder to have work-life boundaries, as a simple example, work-life boundaries or boundaries against somebody that you don't want to do business with, or that, you don't want to associate with, when you have more options for funding your life. If this is the option that is available to you to make ends meet, to keep a roof over your head, to feed your children, like, then you have a lot less options for having those boundaries, right? And so
Yes.
I think like, and this comes up, I think one thing we haven't really touched on, although you've touched on so many marginalized groups, is disabilities. And I know this is really important to you too. And I think that's something that's come up quite a lot on this podcast, both the visibilities that are outward facing, that are very clear, as well as kind of chronic illnesses and things like that, that it sounds great to say, and I have had this conversation on the podcast, that entrepreneurship can give people an opportunity, and leading a business gives people certainly an opportunity to have boundaries in place, and to be able to rest, and to be able to build a schedule that works for what your body's limitations might include. But there's a cost to that. And yeah, so all of that to say, I would like to hear what you think about the financial infrastructure that's like required to run an ethics driven business. What does that look like, and what does it need to look like?
The calculus is so different, Sarah, for folks who, one, want to do business differently, and two, who hold more marginalized identities. We can't say, and that's why the subtitle is about building businesses inside of a broken system. It's a broken system. I'm not going to pretend that you get to do this and there's no cost. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy, right? No, there are real costs because you are inside of a system that is doing at every turn is trying to throw up a monkey wrench to keep you from being able to operate this way because it's disrupting the system and the system does not want to be disrupted, right? So that's part of my frustration with a lot of books. And I guess one of the reasons I wanted to write this book is so many of them are either they're just like, we operate inside of capitalism. So F it, you just got to build a capitalist business as if that's the only option. Or they go too far the other extreme that becomes this sort of as if we live in some idealized society that we don't yet function in and sort of moralizing, showing up in a certain way that if you don't, you're bad. But it doesn't honor the fact that we still are inside of a system that we can't escape, right? The truth is it's messy. It's really messy. We all have to make choices and we have to do that math for ourselves of where can I make positive changes, make values aligned changes, and where can I not yet? Where is the cost too great? Whether that cost is financial, because some of these things come at a financial cost. My client with all that money, with that high earning business, she would have loved to have been able to offer all of her consultants health insurance years ago. That math didn't work, right? So there had to be a point before that could happen. And it's just now getting to a place where that's a possibility. And even with that, there's going to be boundaries. There's going to be limitations. It's not going to be what you would like because we're operating inside of a system, a healthcare system that's deeply flawed in the US, right? She can't change that system. So she has to make choices all along the way that are not going to be perfect choices. There's no perfect choices inside of an imperfect system. So I don't like when people make it seem like it's easy and you should get it all right. I really, really hate those sort of like the purity tests that seem to happen from certain left side of things, because you can't. I have to use technology if I want to run my business. Most technology is operated by some corporate entity that's causing harm, or it's pulling some of its tech from those companies, even
100%. Even right? Like the physical components that make it possible. How are those physical components coming together? Yeah, I'm literally. Yeah,
exactly. So like, I'm not here to pretend that there is a perfect way of doing things or that it won't cost you anything. My goal is to have people bring awareness to choices, to recognize that at every turn, everything we're doing, there is a choice and there is sometimes extraction. And we have to honor that. I have an iPhone. Now my iPhone is really old and I'm going to use it till the thing completely drops dead. I could get a new phone every 2 years. Every time they come out with a new model, I could get one every year. That would be a choice. I could choose to not have a phone at all. Neither of those choices feel right for me, right? Not having one at all means that I can't be in touch with my child and his friend's parents easily to make sure he's safe. There are apps on here that are responsible for the things that I have to do for my kid. That's not a real functional choice for me. But getting a new phone every 2 years, knowing how people are treated to make these phones, that's also not a great choice. But what I can do then is to honor the fact that, yes, I am choosing a technology that I know causes harm, but I'm trying to find ways to reduce that harm as best I can inside of a broken system. And I'm not pretending that I'm not causing harm.
And knowing that we're making tens of thousands of choices a day, and all of those choices have different degrees of potential harm that they're causing to other people. And having to make those choices. I think what's so funny about those purity tests is so many of those purity tests are happening on meta platforms. Well, if you're having, and I say this a lot when people are talking about getting into arguments there or want to fight me about my perspectives, like you're probably typing this with your thumbs on an iPhone on a meta platform. So, I mean, it's also going to really upset you to know that I do get a phone, not every 2 years, but pretty close. I love a new phone. I also
It's
have
not
an
going to
Amazon.
upset me though, Sarah, because that's your choice.
The person who's
okay.
arguing with me, not you personally.
Yeah, okay.
It might also upset that person to know that I have an Amazon Prime membership, and I have since like I went to college. I mean, I've literally always had it. I like all of these things are true, and I don't do it and like laugh about it and say like, oh, it's so great. And my kind of method of trying to affect change or trying to impact how this, I get involved in the policy side, right? And that's something that I've shared a bit on this podcast and on my social media is like, I try to get involved on the policy side in every way I can, including I literally teach public policy at ASU. I'm trying to shape the future of policy makers and policy shapers in my community. Like I'm also trying to have impact there. And so I think, you know, there are different things that are right for different people. And that's exactly what I'm hearing you say. And right, nothing's perfect. And so understanding, and this is so much what Big Brave Business is about and why you and I are friends, because we're doing the best we can with the information that we have and actively seeking more information so we can continue to do better and continue to try to shape the world of business into looking better. And now you go beyond business, right? With a lot of your conversations, this book is obviously a business book, but it nothing exists in a vacuum. And so it's not like that doesn't have repercussions for the rest of people's lives anyway. And I do talk about that, but so much of what you talk about, like you were just talking about a travel conversation, it is so much more than just a business conversation.
Because
all of that
everything is political, Sarah.
Yes, it is.
We have a series on messy liberation this summer that's called Everything is Political. You're going to be a part of it, talking about why podcasting is political. Because everything in our lives is a political choice and a political act. And it doesn't mean that we are always going to be able to, as an example, bringing it back to politics, when I go in to vote, very often neither candidate represents how I show up.
Absolutely.
I'm a socialist.
If my name's not on the page, it's not going to fully represent me. I live in
Missouri. I don't get to vote for socialists here. Okay. And that's
Arizona, same.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say I'm a socialist and take with that what you want, but a democratic socialist, they don't exist here in a way that gets on the ballot. So when I go into there to vote, I don't not vote because neither choice is right. I go in and I vote the best that I can. The thing that most gets me towards the world I want to create. It's not perfect. They're not going to do it the way I want. It's not going to be as fast as I'd like, all of those things, but it's the thing that most aligns with my values. So when I make choices, that's what it is. I make the choice that helps me to most align with my values in the way that I can, with the information I have, the capacity I have, the resourcing I have.
Yes.
Listen, I order from Amazon sometimes too, because I don't have the capacity, the resourcing, the energy. I have a young child to go out and buy each thing at every different store. I can't always do that. Sometimes I try to go buy at stores, but also I live in an area where there's a lot of big box stores that are actually not
on purpose.
So exactly. Like there are no perfect decisions here. The only thing I want for people is to think about these things. You talked about like you're out doing your activist work looks one way. There's a whole chapter towards the end about activists, entrepreneurism. That is entrepreneurism is activism. And how do we show up? And I always talk about Deepa Iyer's social change map. There are many ways that we can all be activists that don't have to look like one thing. It doesn't always look like that person on the front lines picketing. And it doesn't always look like the person who says, I won't use any technology, right? There's different ways that we can each show up and make change. And those change and evolve.
Yeah. And you put it through your own filter. And that's what I've been talking about over the past few weeks. That's what I'm putting into my book too, is how do you build that filter? What does that look like? And understanding that what gets through your filter is going to be unique to you. And also it can change. It's subject to change. More information, more perspectives can shift and change what gets through your filter. And that's part of the point of this podcast. That's what I hope for my book to be. And that's also why I'm such a huge supporter of your work and the book that you've done. So I have 2 more questions for you. No, that's okay. But I could ask you 1,000 more questions. I love this conversation. But I do want to ask both of these. So one thing is, with this work, this book, this particular book, what do you hope actually changes because of the book, both individually for you as well as collectively?
I'm going to start collectively first because it feels easier for some reason. I think because I have shifted so much towards collective thinking. And honestly, that's one of the things I hope is that people start to think just a little beyond our own noses.
But also it's
especially
hard to ask for what we need. So it's
right.
both of those.
Well, and I am
Both of those maps.
speaking more to the people who have more privilege. But honestly, for me, because I think all change starts with awareness. I really believe you cannot change what you cannot see, right? So I always say step one for anything that I'm talking about when people say like, what's the one thing? If it's got to be one thing, it's always awareness. I just hope people leave the book feeling more aware about choice, about the systems they're operating inside of and where they do and maybe don't have as much agency right now. I just want that awareness. I want them to come into their business life and decisions every day with just a little more consciousness, right? Because I think once we do that, you can't unsee it either. So you can't change what you can't see, but you can't unsee it once you see it. And even if you can't make change right now, you start to notice it more. And I think that starts to shift how you show up. So for me, it's always awareness. For myself, goose, I don't know what I like talking about myself as much, Sarah. So that's a little harder. What do I hope the book does for me? I mean, here's the thing. When I started the book, I had exactly one goal, be a published author. As we already said, I've done that. Secondary gravy was going to be a professional, meaning paid author. I've done that now too, because I've sold some books even before it comes out. I'm selling book bundles and I've sold some before the book's even officially launched. Beyond that, I don't know. I just hope people, I would love, in my dream worlds, one, I'd love to be in Ms. Magazine, which I just wrote about on my Substack because it has a very deep place in my heart, which I wrote about. I got to sit with Gloria Steinem and do an interview with her back in college. Ms. Magazine's always been right there as my feminist icon sort of thing, even though I know it's very, has a very interesting history of being whitewashed anyway. So that would be amazing. Second to that is when people think about liberated businesses, decolonizing business, I hope that my name is a part of the conversation. I don't want to be I don't need or want to be the person people think of, but I would love if I felt like my name was part of the conversation. That would feel amazing. That's over the moon kind of expectations there.
Yeah. Okay. Related, but not the same. How did writing this book change how you think about your own work?
Well, it challenged me in all the best ways to realize, well, one, how hard it is to walk the talk, right? Talk the walk, I mean. No, walk the talk. How hard it is to walk the talk. It made me feel even deeper empathy with clients as I'm working on these issues with them, because I was having to put into practice for myself so many things that I talk to others about. It's a lot easier to talk to others about oh, don't let perfectionism keep you from taking action, or your voice does matter in the conversation, or those sorts of things. And they were all coming up for me, still are. And so it's been really good in that and increasing my empathy when I talk about these things, giving me a deeper firsthand experience of really having to do that and all the discomfort that comes with it. So that's definitely been something. And it's also just made me I don't know, proud of myself. Is that okay to say? Because I'm working on that. Yes, proud of myself to be able to set a goal, reach that goal, and then even have some delicious gravy on top of the goal that was not even part of the goal. And in all these amazing ways that it continues to be received and that I'm feeling about it, all of that's been amazing.
Yeah, I am proud of you too.
Oh, thank you.
Inspired by you. And I already was, but hearing that your book was coming out when you talked about it months ago, and then really seeing it all come to fruition and getting to have a little taste preview of it before this conversation. And yeah, I love it. And I want to kind of just wrap up with saying to the person listening who obviously definitely wants to read the book if they haven't already, where can they get it?
Go to BeckyMollenkamp.com/book. Don't worry if you spell my name wrong. Whatever device you're using will correct it, but it's with a K, BeckyMollenkamp.com/book. And you can order the bundles before April 30th. The book comes out April 30th. From there on, you'll be able to order books from me. And I would just say, Amazon, if that's what you need to do, if that's easier, go for it, or bookshop.org or Barnes & Noble. Just know that they keep a big old hunk of the money. So if you want to benefit the author the most, always buy a book directly from an author if you can. Not just me, but anyone, just because publishing I'm learning a lot about publishing and the world and how much money authors actually make. And it's not as much as people think. So yeah.
Very few are making
there are some
just directly off the book. But I think a book is such a like exciting jumping off point for so many opportunities potentially. And at the end of the day, yeah, it's your body of work and it's representative of your body of work. And I think that's an amazing, amazing thing. This conversation has made me personally even that much more excited about the book because obviously we've collaborated in a bunch of ways. We'll continue to. I love that. And I adore you. But I think it really feels like to me, so much of the conversation you are leading and the space that you're holding for these conversations is exactly what I feel like is missing, and a lot of similar gaps that I'm hoping to be able to hold a platform to be able to have. And so, yeah, I'm thrilled about it. I'm excited and just as supportive as I can be. And I hope that the person listening is just as inspired by this. Thank you for your time.
Sarah, you are already holding those spaces and doing that same work. And your book better come out so that I can read it and support you because the world needs your take on this too, right? We need all the lenses on it. There is no definitive anything on anything, right? So
definitely different, but compatible. That's what I love about this is that this whole conversation has felt so compatible with, I've been putting a lot of content that I'm workshopping for the book on the last few episodes of this podcast and this year, I guess, really. And this has just felt so compatible with what I am working on and not the same, but I think really fuels each other very well. And so I think, if you like the conversations that have been happening here, you're definitely, obviously, going to like the book because this conversation fit in it perfectly. So,
and you're going to love Sarah's book when it comes out. And I can't wait to read it either. And
thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me, Sarah, and for holding this kind of space and for being part of the change that we want to see in the world, because that's what we're both trying to do.
I love it. 2 pats on the back for us. Okay. Have a great day. And to you listening, we'll see you next week.